Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the new season of the Provost Conversations in Teaching and Learning. So we're delighted to have a good crowd for our first one this time. We decided to take a slightly different approach today, and rather than have one individual giving some information about what they've been doing and sharing ideas and then taking questions and answers and comments, we decided we'd take three. And not just three, should we say, dare I say, ordinary professors. No such thing as an ordinary professor. All professors are extraordinary. But these are three very special people because each of them has won the State Council for Higher Education in Virginia Outstanding Faculty Award at different times in different years. But each of them has won that award, and that award is given to individual faculty members from the Commonwealth of Virginia, from all of the different schools and colleges, including the Virginia community college system. So there's a huge range of people. And every year they award just 12 of these individual awards among all of the universities and colleges in Virginia. And so to achieve one of these is really, really something. And ODU is proud to have now 27 award winners over the years. So we're really, really proud of that. And you have three here today. On the your far right, my far left, is Mark Butler from the Department of Biological Sciences. In the center, we have Carolyn Rutledge. Professor Rutledge is in the School of Nursing in the College of Health Sciences. And closest to me is Steve Yetiv. And Steve is in political science and geography, to give it its full name, and in the College of Arts and Letters. So a range of different disciplines, a range of different perspectives. So I think it will be an interesting conversation today. I'm now going to hand it over to you. I presume you've decided amongst yourselves who's going to begin.
Yeah, we flipped a three-headed coin, and I lost.
Good, thank you.
These are some of the things I would consider obvious attributes of some really good teachers. Circumstance, luck, and love. And let me explain to you what I mean by this. Circumstance. This is my classroom. For many of the classes I teach marine ecology, I teach a study abroad class to Belize, I get to go and teach students in places like this. And so it's pretty easy for me to get together students who are really keen on this subject. You know, it's not a hard task for me to get students interested in what we're doing here because they love it already. Now, there are other tasks out there that are a little harder, I think, to get students engaged in. And my hat's off to our colleagues in mathematics, for example, where students perhaps may not come to the classroom as prepared to be engaged. And so there's a real challenge that, frankly, I don't have to deal with because of the circumstances I'm in. And so part of, I think, being a good teacher is something having to do with the circumstance. Now, I also teach small classes. And this is a shot from me teaching in Belize. And that's a great advantage as well, I think, because it gives me the opportunity to really engage one-on-one, you know, talk to the students, get to know them a lot better, work with them in smaller groups. And so again, my circumstances, I think, are a little easier than maybe some of you face when you're dealing with this, right? How do we engage students when we have to deal with large lecture hall classes? And it's a necessary evil in all big universities that we have these classes. And there's a lot of techniques now that you can learn, of course. Technology is becoming more and more important, so it allows us to engage students more in this setting. But I would say, even in this setting, I think that to be a teacher that to engage students is really important. I think these are key things no matter what setting we're in. I think we really do, and whatever we can do to try to enhance the interpersonal communications and connections with our students. And sometimes it's a small thing, right? You know, sometimes it's just walking closer to that student and talking to them, you know? But whatever it might be, I mean, we need to engage people. I think keeping it relevant, even if you're teaching mathematics, you know, mathematics really does have relevancy in our society, and there are ways to do that. And people like John Adams in mathematics are wonderful examples of people who make math, for example, relevant in people's lives. And I know Carolyn's going to talk about this too. We feel strongly, I think, about this, is that make it, when you can, experiential. I get my students out underwater. I get them into the environment in which they're working. We do projects, we do science, we do the things that they would do as professionals in the field. And as long as they can experience that, that's a real challenge in some of these settings, but I think this is important. Luck. Like athletes, I think teachers sometimes have the luck of the draw. I mean, athletes, sure, they work really hard at what they do and train long hours, just like what we do. But some athletes, you know, are just endowed with certain physical skills. LeBron James is a phenomenal basketball player, but he probably wouldn't be as good if he was 5'7" and 130 pounds. He's got certain physical capabilities that set him apart and give him an opportunity to be better, to rise above. The same thing with these other folks. And I know a lot of folks say that, you know, there are no born teachers, but I disagree. I really think there are some people out there who really are born to teach. They have whatever it is, you know, a little charisma. They've got a message to first place, but they've got something that makes people want to listen to them. Now, many of these folks, you probably would know this. The center one you wouldn't know. This was actually my major professor from Florida State years ago, and if you could see the logo on his hat, I think he's got it right. Lead learner. That was his perspective in teaching, and he was a phenomenal teacher in so many ways, but part of it was his perspective. And some people have just got it, right? I don't know what it is. We like them. I mean, certain people, just everybody likes. And if you're a teacher and you're endowed with that, well, good on you. But the rest of us are going to have to work a little bit at it. And so sometimes what we can do is work at those by thinking a bit like being an actor or an actress on a stage, right? We can fake it, perhaps. And there's a few things we can do that help us sort of fake it. These are sort of common things you learn that when you step up on a classroom that will help you, I think, engage those students and be more memorable to them. Making eye contact, being, you know, smiling, varying your tone, not speaking in a monotone, and perhaps speaking, you know, slower and clearer than I usually do, I guess. Use your hands and your feet. I walk around a lot, but use your hands and feet. Confidence plays a huge role, I think, when you're teaching. And you know the subject. You know it better than the students. So be confident when you're talking with these folks. But don't patronize them. I mean, they're not dummies. They're there to learn. And so we don't want to patronize them. Being positive, of course, helps. And I think honesty, I mean, that bleeds into, you know, sort of across the aisle. And if they know that you're being honest about things you do and you don't know, and the way in which you know, that plays a big role. So engage your audience, be memorable. Finally, I want to just make a comment about the role of love. Now, not, you know, romantic love or brotherly love, but love for your subject, a passion for what you do. And this is, many of you may know Lytton Musselman. He's a colleague in biology of mine. And Lytton loves plants, loves the plants. And he loves actually the interaction between humans and plants. And he's a phenomenal teacher. And that bleeds over, the passion for what he does bleeds over in his teaching. Now, there are folks out there who say that research and teaching don't mix, and I disagree entirely. I'm a very active researcher. I love what I do, and I love talking to students about it. And whether it's research or a particular area of expertise you have, if you have that passion, hopefully you can instill that in your students, and I think usually it does. And as a part of that is then, you know, yourself being very engaged in what you do. And I tell my students all the time, my graduate students, if you're in science, science is not a job, it's a lifestyle. It is what we become, and if you feel that way, I think it'll bleed over also into your classes. So in summary, I just want to say circumstance, luck, and love, they do have a role in being good teachers. I think, however, that doesn't mean, even though these are the kinds of things that are bestowed upon us, we can all work to become better. And the Center for Learning and Technology, teaching, I mean, is a great place to begin. There are other places where you can get that. This semester I'm taking the semester-long course in writing across the disciplines, and I'm learning all kinds of things I didn't know about. And so take these opportunities you have to learn a little bit more and become a better teacher. Thank you for coming and for listening.
As our provost mentioned before, I'm Carolyn Rutledge, and I'm from the School of Nursing. And I have a similar approach to Mark, yet there are certain parts that are a little bit different. Probably one of the firmest beliefs I've come up with is there's no one technique or method of teaching that is right for everybody. Some people that I run into say it has to be face-to-face. There's no other way we can teach, because how are you going to know when the student, that light bulb goes off and you know they have gotten it? Or how are you going to be able to look around and know that they all have blank stares and don't understand what you're talking about? So how can you do that with distance learning? Others say, well, we have to move in the direction of distance learning because there's so many people out at distances. The way we live, distance learning is a way to connect. Some people feel like the hybrid approach is the way we need to go, where you combine both experiential and distance learning, as well as your face-to-face. Well, I happen to be one that believes in all of these. And when I teach, I do use all of these. I think this starts with your goal. And I had to understand what my goal was in teaching in the field of nursing. And I know none of you have heard about this yet, but there is a healthcare crisis going on. So I feel like I am in the perfect spot to start addressing this issue. And the biggest area that there's a healthcare crisis are in our rural and underserved areas. Now, I've been on faculty at EVMS working with medical students and residents in family practice since 1988. And we have tried to get the family physicians to go to these rural areas. But how do you get them to go to the rural areas if you bring them to the urban areas? You train them in the urban areas, you teach them how to use all the resources that are there, and then you say, okay, now go to Timbuktu and practice without the access you have here. They won't do it. And so in nursing, what we do is we take the education to them. And in doing this, we use Blackboard. But in doing distance learning, it is so very important that you vary your methodology. You use methodology that really connects with the students. And some of the things that I do, if I use PowerPoints, I always narrate, because I'm a firm believer that students learn a lot from the stories. So I can teach them a subject, but then give them stories that they can embrace. And so the stories are part of the PowerPoints. And in fact, many of our distance students come back and say, will you make sure everybody in this program narrates their PowerPoints? It makes a huge difference. Plus, that ties to your different learning styles. There's the visual, there's the auditory. With these students, we bring them on campus for a long weekend once a semester. That allows us to have that face-to-face contact. But even more importantly, it gives us an opportunity to have the students participate in experiential learning that it's hard to do online. And so my classroom, or my lab, is a little different from Mark's lab. Who wouldn't want to be in Mark's lab? But mine is right there in front of the patient. It's taking care of people. And so when we bring the students to class, we want it to be active. We want them moving around. We want them doing things that we couldn't teach them online, because otherwise they might as well stay at these distances. So we will do things like set them up with standardized patient or patient actors at EVMS. And when they have learned about chronic illness, they've learned about acute illness. So when they come on campus, they're working with patients. They're actually carrying out these skills, but they're also interacting with us and getting feedback on how they're performing. And how many of you have heard of the reverse classroom? Okay, this is a big approach out there, and this is very similar. We teach them online, we bring them in, and we have them doing their homework. We have them doing their hands-on. I have very strong beliefs about faculty and characteristics about faculty that really make a big difference. One of them, I believe it's important for the faculty to practice what they preach. And if I expect my students to be doing research, then I better be doing research. If I expect them to be seeing patients, I better know what it's like to see patients. And so as part of nursing, I see patients as a family nurse practitioner 1 day a week at Eastern Virginia Medical School in family medicine. Those patients are very sick patients. And you have your Medicare, your Medicaid. So I'm seeing some of the toughest populations. It gives me stories to share with the students. It also allows me to understand what they're facing. So when they come and say, well, I can't collect data in a clinical setting, I can tell them how they can because I'm doing it. And I go with Mark on this as well. Be passionate. Passion is contagious. And if your students know you love the field and can share your passion, then they start embracing it. And I have to say I am extremely passionate about nursing, about the role that we can play in making things different for healthcare as we move forward. And then I think it's important for faculty to see the potential in their students, and then also help the students to see their own potential. I mean, we're the ones that know what the field needs, and if we can match a student with the opportunities out there, it can be huge. I mean, I have students that come back and say, you know, when I came into the program, I was looking forward to it, but I never knew I could do what I can do now. I am not afraid any longer. And I think that is something that we should all consider with their students. Okay, beliefs with students. I believe that students want to feel successful. They want to be seen and they want to be understood. They want us as teachers, faculty, to give them the tools that will empower them to move forward. They want to make a difference, have significance, and they want to be led by vision. One of the things that we do with their students, a class that I absolutely love, we have a course that is personal strategic planning. It's our way of teaching the strategic planning process. But what we do with the students, we bring them on, and it's one of their experiential learning activities when they come on campus. We bring them together, and we help them come up with their own core values. And then we face them with the real situation. We are in a healthcare crisis. How are you, at the end of this program, going to be able to address this healthcare crisis? And from there, they come up with their own vision, their mission. They come up with objectives and strategies. And throughout the rest of the program, they are looking at each assignment as ways to help them accomplish their goals, their vision. In the bottom corner there are 2 students that graduated from our program. They came in wanting to open their own practice. They are in rural Virginia, 75% unemployment. And they had this huge vision, but they needed the tools to do it. And so we continued to work with them, continued to empower them. At the end of halfway through the program, they opened their clinic. They were smart. They were 2 smart ladies. They built their practice using house plans, so if it went under, they could sell it as a house. And they're going gangbusters. In fact, it's a mother-daughter team, both in the program together, and she's going to be one of the keynote speakers at our national conference in 2 weeks. This lady, I was told from people in the field of medicine that I was crazy for accepting her. Because how was she going to impact healthcare? She was too old. Her time was going to be too short. This lady, when she graduated from the program, was 76 years old. So it's seeing them, it's realizing what vision they have and empowering them to accomplish that vision. So this I hold very dear to me. This is a poem by Howard Rayner, and he wrote the poem, and then Gary Price developed a statue that goes with it, a sculpture. And in fact, my husband actually has it in his dental office because it just means so much to us in how we look at the world. And it says, grab hold and take this hand that reaches out to you. Look up into my eyes, my spirit cries out to you. Friendship is my thought. Let us climb the jagged cliff of life and fight the ascent of opposition together. If I can lift you today, you will look back and grab the hands of 1,000 more. That is the way the Great Spirit would have it. And to me, as faculty members, as teachers, we want to extend that hand to bring the students up, and in turn, they will reach out their hand to the next person. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. There is no cookie cutter approach to teaching, but these are some of the things that have been useful for me. The first category is to motivate students, and I don't think we can underestimate how important that is. There's this sappy saying that no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care, but there actually is something to this sappy saying. In fact, a Gallup poll in the last few months, Gallup polled 30,000 graduates, and it asked them what made them successful in their lives, not just in their work, but in terms of their overall welfare. And they identified having at least one professor that cared for them as one of the most significant things that motivated them, be it a professor that they met with occasionally or an outright mentor. Another aspect of motivation that I try to employ is to suggest to students that academics is not just abstract, but it's tied to their career prospects, because many of the students today are concerned about whether they'll get a job. And what studies show is that analytical thinking is one of the things that employers consider most importantly. And so I try to make the connection between what we'll study in class and how it'll develop their analytical thinking, be it the building of hypothesis, hypothesis testing, knowledge, content, and so on and so forth. And I also point out to them that employers do look at grades, so grades matter. Sometimes I have students come in and say, oh, I'm just getting a 1.8 or 2.3, just getting my card and going out there. And sometimes they don't make the connection between all these things and getting a job. I also want to point out that, like my colleagues, it's really critical to be excited about what you do. In the same Gallup poll of 30,000 students, students identified a professor that sparked their interest and curiosity as the most important thing for their success in their job and also in their life more broadly. 63% identified that as most critical compared to all the other categories being in the 20s or 30s in percentage importance. Categories like writing a capstone or going abroad or working in groups, right? So a professor that cared got around 33%, which was the second highest, and a professor that sparked their interest through being motivated about his or her subject, 63% said that was what was critical. And you can call this up on the internet, Gallup poll, professors, student success. Moving to the second category, I think it's important to try to push them to be analytical. And in a way, this is obvious, but it's less obvious when you come to the classroom and try to execute it. And so what I try to do is I constantly are asking them questions. I don't want them to rest mentally. I even ask them, what did the last person say? You know, what did I just say? Can someone articulate what I said? And if they're sitting there and just staring at me, then I'm telling them, hey, you know, you got to pay attention, right? And then it keeps their motors running. Play devil's advocate. Studies show that this is one of the most important things for breaking down hardcore assumptions, assumptions which may be false. And decision makers in government employ this to get to the best decision possible, at least in theory. To just have someone play devil's advocate. And I see this as a non-confrontational way to get students to think. I tell them, look, I'm not against you. I'm playing devil's advocate. Are you sure about what you just said? And are there other ways to think about it? Continuing with analytical thinking, it's interesting. When I write a paper, I write a book, and the referees look at it. One of the problems in my work that the referees point to is that I did not think about other causes of X. It's something simple, isn't it? What are the other causes of X? When I'm playing that same role, reviewing other people's work, sometimes it boils down to, didn't you think about other causes of X? In statistics, we have multiple regression. We have independent variables. We can switch them around to see if that changes the variation in the dependent variable. Mark, I'm sure, could tell you a lot about this. But statistics is about correlation, and this here I'm talking about causation. So I push students to think, what else could cause X? Simple question, it really forces thinking. I also like to shift gears in lecture. A recent study showed that shifting gears in lecture improves the memory of students and their analytical thinking. And by this I mean, for example, recently I was giving a talk on ISIS, the terror group in the Middle East. But I gave that talk within the context of a longer talk on the evolution of terror. So that was one subject. Then I would switch gears and I would move to ISIS now. Then I'd move back to the evolution of terror and move back to ISIS. And studies show that doing that can improve their memory and analytical thinking because they have to shift gears too. They're not just droning along on just one subject for the whole time. In addition, I like to provide guidance on the syllabus to help students avoid mistakes. And here, what I do is I ask myself, what are all the errors that I've made in writing papers, and I list all the errors on 2 pages on the syllabus. I condense the errors that I've made in 20 or 30 years, let's just say 20 years, of academic work. And I do that on the basis that we can learn from our own mistakes, but that's a little painful. So it's a little better to learn from other people's mistakes. And I think that this kind of strategy also helps them think analytically by looking at the errors that we've made, that we lay out for them, and having them contemplate that on the syllabus formally. Okay, thank you.
We'd like to open it up for your questions.
I had a question about the resources that you have available to you. All of you mentioned that you have resources like being able to go to other countries and being able to go diving, and the resources that are made available to you via EVMS and the university. As teachers and professors, and how do you go about being successful with what you just said when you don't have those resources available to you?
Well, I don't think you need a lot of resources to be a good teacher, frankly. I mean, it helps, and it's nice to travel. Of course, can enhance your work. Winning a grant can enhance your work by getting you time off. But lots of the things that we were talking about today didn't involve resources as far as I can recall. So while resources are important, I think just getting the basic aspects of good teaching down is something you can accomplish without it.
I would say some of the things we do require a little bit more resources. Fortunately, I have been able to get a number of educational grants that have allowed me to pay for some of the things that we use. But once we get it in place, then we can continue. One of the areas that I focus on a lot with my education as well is with telehealth. Because again, we're trying to get the healthcare out to these rural and underserved areas. And telehealth is a good way to connect various disciplines. And so I have used grant funding to get there. But other ways are we have been able to provide students with learning experiences at EVMS with the standardized patients for years without grants. And what we have done there is had them pay a lab fee, and that lab fee goes toward it. One of the other things that we're doing is collaborating. I think collaborating with other disciplines within our own university, and also the last grant I got, I will also be collaborating with the fourth-year medical students at EVMS. So reaching out to people who are in your field and seeing what sort of learning activities you can pull together can be huge. Service learning is another way of pulling some of these things together.
I guess the answer I would give is one I give to, in our department we have a mentoring program where all the new faculty come in and, old folks like me get the chance to mentor them. And my answer, if you were sitting right across the table with me, I'd say, find a way, dude. You can't wait for the university to provide you with resources. Sorry, with the provost here, but the university has limited resources. And we were just talking, when you arrive and you get startup monies, that's when you're going to have some resources. But after that, we have to find our own ways as educators to make, the people are most successful, find innovative ways of doing that. Now, as Steve said, I think the teaching, the classroom part of it isn't necessarily something that takes necessarily a lot of resources, but to do a lot of the experiential stuff does. And in those cases, I've used a lot of my own, so in terms of grants, I haven't had any educational grants, but I used a lot of my discretionary funds from the research grants that I get, and I get discretionary funds afterwards. I use a lot of my own research funds to fund students. I find a lot of ways for research monies to, to have things that work for both research and teaching, right? So we're utilizing both those things. We really want our students to go to scientific meetings. I helped organize a Marine Biology Student Association. They can now go to Student Government Association. Now every year we've got 12 students going to a scientific meeting funded in that way by SGA. And so I think to be successful as a faculty member, you have to find a way, right? And you can't wait for manna from heaven in the university. You're going to have to, a lot of what happens in universities bubbles up from the faculty, doesn't come down from the top. We have to kind of make these opportunities for ourselves, I think.
Yeah. Might just be worth pointing out, because maybe not everybody's familiar with that, but there are faculty development grants that you can apply to that are run through the Faculty Senate. They're small amounts, but they're specifically for teaching. And then, of course, there are also research grants, seed money grants, so several of them through the Research Foundation for that. But from the teaching perspective, the faculty development grants, that the Faculty Senate website has the information about those. And in fact, although we don't have a lot of money in that pool, it's seldom fully utilized, because people just don't ask for it.
Other questions?
A lot of what you talked about was love for teaching and energizing students and getting them to think and all these things. And I was just thinking, man, this sounds wonderful, this sounds fantastic, but I think when I run into faculty around the university, that faculty love to bemoan the poorer students. So I guess my question is, do you think you've been effective in energizing the faculty in your departments to really focus on the more positive? Ultimately we're here because we do make a difference, and we do pull the 1,000 up behind us, as you said. So how have you influenced your departments in terms of teaching? That's what I'm asking.
You want to tackle that one?
This is something I am very excited about. Someone once told me that I had two choices. I could figure out where I was going and head there with my passion and my vision, and then those who wanted to be a part would join. Or I could worry about trying to change those around me that might not have my vision. And then I would not get anywhere. And that has been, are you trying to? And I feel like that has sort of been, I guess, my mantra in a sense. And as soon as I stopped worrying about what other people were saying or where they were stuck and started saying, well, I'm going to go this way, please join me. This is what I want. And I kept putting my vision out. It amazed me. At about that same time, we started developing our doctoral program in nursing. the faculty that came on board, and some of them out of retirement, and they said, the reason we're part of this is because we believe in this vision. And as we've progressed, we've had more and more people come on that have the vision, and then the people that have maybe the more negative attitude sort of have a choice. They can either stay where they are or they can join the group that's moving forward. And we've found more and more people to want to be part because we have fun. We're excited to come to work, but I think you have to constantly put it out there and just don't worry about the other. Let that take care of itself.
I don't have anything to add to that.
I agree with her.
Yeah.
That was good.
Thank you.
There's a question back there.
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't see you.
My question is, like, when you go back to, like, I don't know, 10, 20 years, before, and, like, you start teaching, and how did you balance the relationship between you and the students as, like, friendly, but as well as kind of like a teacher and also, the figure that has the authority in the class as well? So my question goes back to myself, is like, it's been 3 years that I'm teaching now. And this year, for instance, sort of like last week, a student of mine sent an email saying that he's apologizing about his misbehavior in the classroom, and like a long email. And today another student came to me and was like, I didn't want to talk in the class, I just did it, but like, I'm not being disrespectful and everything. And like for 2 years, I didn't see these things, but with this classroom, I'm seeing, students coming and saying these things, which was a bit like, I was thinking that maybe I was losing up in the class. That's why they are coming and saying these things or not. It's just like, does this happen occasionally to everyone or not?
Those boundaries can get blurred, so it's a good question. But I think that it's better to err on the side that the students are not your friends. They are your students. They are people that you care about, but they are not friends in the sense of, doing things in a social manner unless it's in an organized setting. Because if you err on the other side, which is to be too friendly, it can be misinterpreted and it can detract from the academic enterprise. So if you have any questions about it, I would suggest, it's my view, just to err on the side that they are not your friends, they are people that you're teaching in a professional setting, but you care about.
Yeah, I guess just to add to that, I understand what you're saying because I'm remarkably immature, and prone to want to be in the same realm with the students, so to speak. But I think there are little things we can do. I think it's very important, though, to kind of keep that distance. There are little things you could do. Now, while my graduate students, for example, they're free to call me by my first name, undergraduates, never. And in fact, in the presence of undergraduates, I never refer to another faculty member by their first name. It's always, Dr. Rutledge or what have you. And I think, so maintaining sometimes those little small bits of formality, I think kind of helps situate this so that we can distance ourselves, because I agree, when we cross that boundary, there's all kinds of bad things that can happen. And I think it's better to err on the side of not being, the friends with the students, as mentors who care, but not friends.
Hello. I have a quick question. Can anyone talk to the importance of a teaching philosophy? I think putting together like my third year review and then putting together this evaluation, I've been working on my teaching philosophy and making sure that it's aligned with what I believe. And I took like an extended amount of time working on it. And I thought, like, is this important to do this much on this, or is it something that's more like a formality, like no one uses it after the review period? Like, so I've been actually trying to go by it like as a guide, like, okay, technology is important to me, so let me put something in here about how technology influences my life and the students. So can anyone talk to that, the teaching philosophy, if you use it, if it's important? Thank you.
Well, each of us that were SCHEV recipients, we had to really embrace that. And I would have to say that was probably, I know for me it was one of the hardest sections of the whole proposal to write. And so if you want some good ideas, you can go online to SCHEV and see what everybody wrote. That will give you a lot of good ideas. But I do think it's very, very important to understand what your philosophy is, because it comes out in everything you do. It comes out in the type courses you develop. It comes out in how you address the students and how you work with your colleagues. And so I would recommend, and I do have to say the ones that that were on the SCHEV website are excellent. And I think if you reviewed some of those, you would get an idea and you'd go, okay, I'm beginning to get the feel for it.
Yeah, and I would just say, for those of you who maybe are not very philosophical, and I admit to being one of those folks. I mean, until one has to do these things, I really think these exercises are more important for you than they're important for anyone else. That moments, hours, days you spend reflecting on this really does, I think, a lot for you in terms of refining what you think and where you might want to go, with the changes you might want to make. And I think that's more important, the personal reflection part of it, than trying to write this for somebody else. It's not for somebody else. I think it's really for you and that process, really.
I agree with my colleagues. I would just add one thing. In most cases, your colleagues won't read your philosophy and say, we don't like it, redo it. But as Mark's suggesting, Carolyn, it's important for you. And the way I think about it is that in life we have goals and then we have strategies for different things we do. And a teaching philosophy is like goals and then strategies and how they intermix. So laying that out formally can illuminate where you stand in terms of how to meet your goals.
So when you think about when you started your careers as young faculty, I'm sure you had different challenging situations that you had to overcome as instructors. I was wondering if you can talk a little bit about it and how did you overcome those situations?
Actually, I think the most challenging situations I've had to deal with were actually not with students, were not with faculty, but were with administrators. No, I think trying to sometimes as a faculty member to get things done, and the current administration, of course, is perfect, but prior administration, like you said, many years ago, it's sometimes hard to, I think, get ideas to bubble up from the faculty members, and to get some of the university administration to embrace some of those ideas and consider that. I've always felt that ODU's been a pretty top-down kind of oriented university, frankly, and not very bottom-up. And I think the biggest challenge I have felt over the years is trying to engage upper administration to listen more. Not to come down and talk, but to listen a bit more and to act on those sorts of things. And so I think as a not so much as a teacher there, but really as a faculty member at a university who really cares and wants to make things better for the students here, that's probably been, I think, my biggest challenge.
One challenge that I would say I ran into more so, and I think the more junior you are as a faculty member, the more this comes across, and that's almost, do they like me, or do they like what I'm teaching? Am I doing it okay? And I think it just takes time, and so you try to do things to please people. You try to do things that you think would please the students or would please other faculty. And I think when you're doing that, sometimes you're not being true to yourself. And so, again, it goes back to several of the things we've said, our philosophy, our vision, what we're all about, and then really what do we want the students to come away with. And if we can keep our eye on the goal and then keep reiterating it to our students and to ourselves, it's almost like you need to paste it on your mirror so every morning you look at it and go, this is what I'm about. But I think it's not getting sidelined because you're trying to please somebody.
I think it was Isaiah Berlin, or I may be mistaken, but I think it was who came up with the idea of the fox and the hedgehog. And the fox is an actor that knows a lot of things, but nothing in great depth. And the hedgehog is an actor that knows one thing in great depth, but not a lot of things. My biggest challenge has been to try to figure out how to be a specialist in the way of a hedgehog, but also to know a lot of other things in the way of the fox. How to strike that balance? That's been very hard to do because our careers usually get boosted if we're specialists, but we have diverse interests. So one of the ways that I came up with was to try to identify an area that I could become a specialist in, which was connected to bigger things. So energy, for instance, is something I tried to learn about, although there's so much to know. It's humiliating sometimes, but and energy is connected to bigger things like American foreign policy and conflict. So that's how I've tried to reconcile the fox-hedgehog issue.
Interesting. Questions? Really? Gosh. Okay, well, we want to thank our panel. Thank you very much.